I'm Giselle, age 29. And if you'd told me 10 years ago that I'd one day live in a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a skyline view, I would have laughed, not because I didn't believe in myself, but because no one else ever did. Growing up, I was the child who blended into the background. I wasn't rebellious or loud. I didn't cause problems. I was just there. My parents had 2 other kids, my brother Nathan and my sister Mia, and it was like all the family spotlight naturally landed on them. I don't think anyone ever intended to make me invisible. It just happened slowly, like a shadow forming behind a wall. When I turned 10, my mom threw a huge birthday party for my sister. Her birthday was 3 days before mine, but the celebrations were always combined, and somehow, by the time the day came, all the decorations said, "Happy birthday, Mia." I never saw my name on the cake, not once. It's strange how things like that can shape a person's silence. I didn't cry. I didn't complain. I just watched, learned, and made a quiet promise to myself that I would never need anyone to remember me in order to feel that I existed. School became my hiding place. I wasn't the most brilliant student, but I was curious. I used to stay late in the library, not because I loved the smell of old pages or the quiet, though I did, but because it was the one place where nobody ignored me. Books don't choose favorites. They don't forget your name. At home, conversations drifted around me like wind. I'd try to share something, a small win, maybe an A on a science test, but it would always get brushed off by a louder story from Nathan or a compliment meant for Mia. "Wow, Mia, you're so talented," my mom would say, flipping through my sister's art portfolio. And there I'd be, holding a paper with a big red 97 written on top, pretending it didn't matter. By the time I was 15, I had mastered invisibility. At family dinners, I would help set the table, serve the food, and quietly clear everything after. My mother often forgot to make my favorite dish. My father rarely asked how school was, but they never forgot Nathan's soccer matches or Mia's choir recitals. The strange thing is, I didn't hate them. I just felt disconnected, like I was born into a family where my presence was a placeholder, not a priority. When graduation day came, I remember sitting on the bleachers, my cap tilted slightly crooked, my heart quietly waiting for something that never came. My parents. They didn't show up. They said later that Nathan had a minor accident that day. He'd scraped his knee while biking, and they had to take him to the clinic. I nodded and smiled. I told them it was fine, but I knew it wasn't. That was the first real crack, the moment I started separating my worth from their approval. After school, I got a scholarship to study business at a university 3 hours away. My parents barely reacted. My mom said, "Oh, that's nice. Make sure you don't forget to call your sister on her birthday." I wanted to laugh, but instead I just said, "Sure." Moving out was the easiest goodbye of my life. I thought they'd miss me. They didn't. Weeks passed before anyone called. Then months. Eventually, the silence became routine. University was hard. Not academically, but emotionally. I was so used to being overlooked that when people noticed me, I didn't know what to do with it. I made a few friends, kept my circle small, and poured myself into part-time jobs. I worked in a coffee shop during mornings, and at night I took online freelancing gigs, anything that gave me a sense of independence. Money became more than survival. It became proof. Proof that I could exist on my own terms. I remember once during my second year, my rent was overdue, and I had to choose between paying for electricity or buying food. I sat in my small apartment, wrapped in a blanket, typing away on an old laptop, writing product descriptions for some random website. I earned $30 that week. I used 10 for instant noodles and 20 for rent. It sounds sad, but I wasn't miserable. I was determined. Every hardship was a quiet whisper of strength, a voice inside me saying, "You're building something no one else can take credit for." When I graduated, no one from my family came. I sent them an invitation out of courtesy, but I already knew the answer. They forgot. That night, I walked home in the rain, holding my degree close to my chest. It wasn't the paper that mattered. It was the silence behind it. I was free. After college, I moved to the city. I didn't have much. Just a used car, a suitcase, and a list of dreams I refused to say out loud. I took a job as a marketing assistant at a small tech startup. The pay was modest, but I loved the work. Slowly, I climbed my way up. Promotions, late nights, and endless self-learning. I stopped waiting for approval and started giving it to myself. Over time, I saved enough to start a small business on the side, a design consultancy that helped new companies build their brand image. At first, I did everything alone: logos, websites, copywriting, client calls at 2 a.m. But I was good, and word spread. By 26, I had a small team. By 27, we landed a big client, a global luxury brand that changed everything. It was the kind of deal that takes years to earn, but I'd done it with persistence and quiet professionalism. I didn't tell my family. Why would I? They never asked. For the next 2 years, I focused on building stability, emotionally and financially. I bought a small apartment, then sold it when I could finally afford a penthouse downtown. It wasn't just luxury, it was peace. My own space, my own rules, my own silence. The view from my balcony became my therapy. Every night, I'd sit there with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker like 1,000 tiny promises. I didn't have anyone to share it with, but strangely, I didn't feel lonely. Then, one ordinary evening, everything changed. Not because of something I did, but because of something my cousin posted. Her name's Lila. We'd always been close, at least more than I was with the rest of my family. She visited me one weekend, took a few pictures of my place, the living room, the balcony, even me standing by the window with the skyline behind me. She asked if she could post one on her Instagram story. I didn't think much of it. The next morning, I woke up to 20 missed calls. The first one I answered wasn't from a friend or a client. It was from my mother. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen, her name glowing like a ghost from a forgotten past. 3 years. That's how long it had been since I'd last heard her voice. When I finally picked up, her tone wasn't warm. It wasn't even awkward. It was urgent. "Giselle, hi. It's been so long. We've been trying to reach you. How are you? Oh, I saw your cousin's post. Beautiful house, my goodness. You've really made it, haven't you? Listen, sweetheart. We actually need to talk about something important." There was a pause, the kind that feels heavy before the real reason comes out. "We're in a bit of a situation," she continued. "Your dad's business had some trouble and, well, we need about $39,000 to fix things. You could sell that apartment, right? It's time to give back to the family." Her words hung in the air. Give back to the family. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The same family that forgot my birthdays. The same family that didn't come to my graduation. The same family that hadn't called me in years now remembered my number because they needed money. I said nothing for a moment. "Just silence. Giselle?" she asked. "You there?" I finally said, in the calmest voice I could. "Yes, Mom. I'm here." But in my heart, something colder than anger began to form. It wasn't hatred. It was clarity, because for the first time, I saw the pattern for what it truly was. They only saw value in me when I had something to offer. That night, I sat on my balcony again, staring at the city below. The lights seemed dimmer. The tea tasted bitter. I thought about my entire life. All the times I'd given without being noticed. All the years I tried to earn love that was never really there. And for the first time, I wasn't sad. I was done. That was the night my calm revenge began, not with anger, but with a plan. That night, after my mother's call, I didn't sleep. Not because I was upset, but because I was trying to understand why I wasn't upset. You'd think after years of neglect, hearing her voice again would stir something inside me. Anger, maybe, or relief, or confusion. But instead, I felt nothing. just a quiet detachment, as if I were observing a stranger's problem from a distance. I sat on the balcony until the city lights began to fade with the dawn. Somewhere deep inside, I knew this was an important moment, one of those invisible crossroads that change the direction of your life forever. They had reached out, not for love, not to reconnect, but for money. $39,000. They'd even said the number like it was pocket change, like I owed it to them for existing. At around 6 a.m, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother. Giselle, please respond. It's urgent. Your father is really stressed. Then another, from my sister Mia. Hey, I heard you're doing super well. Congrats. Mom said you might help out a bit. You're so lucky to be rich now. I stared at the screen, and for the first time in years I let myself laugh. Not out of joy, but disbelief. Lucky? They called it luck, as if my success had fallen out of the sky, as if all those sleepless nights, lonely meals, and years of hard work were just coincidence. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I went to work like nothing had happened. My team had a big presentation that day, and I didn't want personal drama clouding my focus. I put on a calm smile, spoke confidently in the meeting, and walked my clients through a campaign proposal worth 6 figures. When they approved it, my entire team cheered, but even as people clapped, part of me was somewhere else, back in that small childhood room, the one with peeling paint and no decorations, where I used to dream of being seen. After work, I stopped by a coffee shop and ordered the same drink I used to make when I was a barista. Medium latte, 1 sugar, extra foam. I took a seat by the window and watched people rushing by, families laughing, couples talking, friends taking selfies. It felt distant, like another world. That's when I decided something. I wasn't going to block my family. I wasn't going to scream, or argue, or list all the ways they had failed me. I was going to do something far more powerful. I was going to let them see what they had lost. That was my revenge. Calm, quiet, and devastating in its simplicity. When I got home, I finally texted my mother. Hey Mom, I'm fine. Glad to hear from you after all this time. What happened with Dad's business? Her reply came within seconds. Oh, thank God, sweetheart. It's been a tough time. He made a few bad investments. We just need $39,000 to fix it and everything will be okay. I told him you'd help. You've always been so kind. That line, you've always been so kind, hit differently. Not because it was true, but because it was manipulative. They never noticed my kindness when it wasn't convenient. I didn't answer right away. I wanted her to feel the same waiting I'd felt for years, so I left the message on read and went about my week. 2 days later, she called again. I let it ring. Then came a message from my father, the first one I'd received from him in almost 5 years. Giselle, I'm disappointed. Your mother told me you're ignoring us. Is this how you treat your family? You should remember where you came from. That one stung. Not because I cared about his opinion, but because it showed exactly how little he'd changed. The guilt tactics, the emotional manipulation, the same methods they used my whole life to make me feel small. I took a deep breath, set my phone down and whispered to myself, this time, it's different. That weekend, I invited my cousin Lila over. She was the one who had unintentionally set all of this in motion with her Instagram post. When I told her what happened, she covered her mouth, horrified. Oh my God, Giselle. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this. I just wanted to share how proud I am of you. I smiled. It's not your fault. Honestly, maybe it's time this happened. Maybe it's time I stopped pretending they care. Lila frowned. What are you going to do? I took a sip of tea, thinking, something calm. Something that'll make them see the difference between love and greed. Over the next few days, I started crafting my plan. I didn't need to ruin their lives. I just needed them to confront what they'd created. A daughter who learned to survive without them, and a woman who no longer owed them anything. My first step was subtle. Communication, but on my terms. I texted my mother again. Hey, Sorry for the late reply. I've been really busy with work. Can you tell me exactly what happened? Maybe I can help somehow. The next 20 minutes were a flood of messages, long paragraphs about how my father's partner betrayed him, how they were at risk of losing their house, how stressful things had been. Each sentence ended with a soft reminder. We're family, Giselle. Family helps each other. I read every word carefully. There was emotion there, yes, but not love. It was desperation dressed up as affection. I waited until the next morning to respond. I understand, Mom. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you soon. Then I didn't, not for a week. During that week, something interesting happened. They started calling more, leaving voice messages filled with concern, then guilt, then frustration. You've changed, Giselle. We raised you better than this. Don't you care that your father is sick with worry? Each message became less about need and more about control. It reminded me of my childhood, the emotional tug-of-war where my feelings were never mine to own. Except this time, I wasn't the little girl waiting for approval. I was the woman who held the power of silence. By the second week, I decided to visit them. Not to help, but to see, with my own eyes, the people who had once made me invisible. When I arrived at their house, nothing much had changed. The same cracked driveway, the same faded paint, the same old furniture that smelled like time had stopped moving years ago. My mother opened the door, smiling too widely. Giselle, oh, you look so beautiful, my darling. She reached to hug me, and I let her, briefly. It felt foreign, mechanical. My father appeared behind her, pretending not to limp from what I guessed was stress. Well, look who decided to show up, he said with a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. We sat down. They made tea, talked about how proud they were, how everyone in the family has been talking about your success. That sentence, everyone's been talking about your success, made me realize something painful. They didn't love me. They loved the image of me, the version that made them look good. After half an hour of small talk, my mother finally got to the point. So, about the money. There it was. I smiled faintly. Right, the $39,000. She looked relieved that I brought it up myself. Yes, sweetheart. It would really save us. You know how family is. We help each other. And after all, we supported you growing up. Supported me. That word almost made me laugh out loud. I stirred my tea slowly, letting the spoon clink against the cup. You're right, Mom. Family helps each other. Her face softened. So you'll do it? I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who had once forgotten my existence at every family event now sitting across from me, waiting to be saved by the child she never celebrated. I'll think about it, I said calmly. My father's patience broke. Think about it? You live in a penthouse, Giselle. What's there to think about? We're your parents. You owe us that much. That word, owe, hit harder than any insult. I owed them nothing but the truth. Still, I smiled, kept my tone soft. I'll let you know soon. As I left their house, my mother followed me to the door. We're really counting on you, honey. Don't let us down. I didn't answer. I just nodded. The moment I got back into my car, I let out a long breath. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. There was no anger left, only clarity. They hadn't changed. They never would. But I had. That night, back in my penthouse, I started writing an email. Not to them, but to my lawyer. It wasn't about money. It was about peace. Because my revenge wasn't going to be in words or arguments. It was going to be in boundaries. The next chapter of my life would not include them. At least, not in the same way. And the best part? They would be the ones to feel it. Slowly, deeply, inevitably. This was only the beginning. Driving home from that visit, I realized something. Revenge doesn't always come in storms or dramatic scenes. Sometimes it comes wrapped in silence, wearing a calm smile that hides every bruise the past ever gave you. The streetlights blurred outside my windshield as I thought about everything my parents had said. The entitlement, the guilt, the sudden affection that appeared only when money was involved. They hadn't changed. They'd just found a new way to need me. I parked in my building's underground garage and sat there for a moment, staring at my hands on the steering wheel. My nails were painted a soft beige, the same color I used to paint them when I was in college, working nights and dreaming of freedom. It struck me how far I'd come from that girl who used to hide her tears while typing on an old laptop. Now I was successful, independent, and still somehow, that same little girl inside wanted her parents to see her, just once, for who she truly was. But wanting that recognition now felt childish. I didn't crave their love anymore. I just wanted peace, and that meant closing the loop on this entire painful circle. Over the next few days, I thought deeply about what I wanted to do. I could easily write a check for $39,000. I wouldn't even notice it missing. But it wasn't about the money. It was about what it symbolized. If I sent them that money, it would be like erasing all those years of silence, as if none of it had ever happened. It would confirm to them that I existed only as a resource, a walking wallet, not a daughter. So instead, I came up with another plan, quiet, deliberate, and perfectly fitting for the kind of revenge I wanted, the kind that teaches through realization, not retaliation. First, I started replying to their messages with patience, but also distance. Every time my mother texted, "We're so proud of you, honey," I replied with polite, short sentences. "Thank you. I hope you and Dad are doing okay." If she mentioned money, I changed the subject. "That sounds difficult. I hope things get better soon." I knew it would confuse her. I could almost hear the frustration behind her carefully typed words. I wasn't giving them a yes or a no, just silence disguised as courtesy. Then, one day, I decided to take a small but symbolic step. I sent them a gift. Not money, not something expensive, but a framed photograph. It was a picture of me standing on my penthouse balcony, the same one my cousin Lila had taken months ago. Below it, I wrote one simple line: "Thank you for teaching me independence." When the courier confirmed delivery, I waited. For hours, for a day, then 2. On the 3rd day, my phone rang. My mother. "Giselle," she said, her voice sharper than usual. "We got your picture." I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. "I'm glad it arrived safely." There was a pause. "You know, that wasn't very nice. We're in trouble here, and you're sending us photos? What is that supposed to mean?" Her voice trembled, half anger, half confusion. I stayed calm. "It means what it says, Mom. You taught me independence. I learned it well." She went quiet. Then, in a softer tone, "You're punishing us, aren't you?" I didn't answer that. "How's Dad?" I asked instead. She sighed. "He's worried. You know how much stress he's under." I wanted to remind her of all the nights I was under stress too, alone in a small apartment, wondering if I mattered. But I didn't. There was no point in dragging the past into another fight. Instead, I said, "I hope he takes care of himself. Tell him I said that." And before she could reply, I ended the call, politely, without anger, without tears. It was strange how freeing that felt. For once, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't the forgotten daughter trying to be noticed, or the obedient child trying to please. I was just me, steady, composed, in control. Days passed. Then a week. The messages slowed down. The calls became less frequent. My parents were starting to realize that I wouldn't be swayed by guilt or nostalgia, that I wasn't the same girl who once waited by the phone hoping they'd call. Meanwhile, life moved on. Work was thriving. My company had just launched a new project that got featured in a major magazine. I celebrated quietly with Lila. Dinner, laughter, and a toast to resilience. She looked at me that night and said, "You know, I think your calmness scares people." I laughed. "Why do you say that?" "Because you don't fight back the way they expect. You don't scream or cry. You just Stop giving them access. That's scarier to people who rely on your reaction. Her words stayed with me. Maybe she was right. Maybe the silence itself was the revenge. A few weeks later, my brother Nathan reached out for the first time in years. His message was simple. Hey Giselle, I know Mom and Dad have been weird. I just wanted to say congrats on everything. I saw the article. Proud of you. I didn't know how to respond. Nathan was never cruel to me growing up, just indifferent, swept up in his own world. Still, something in me softened. Thanks, Nathan. How are things with you? We talked for a while. It felt normal, almost easy. He told me he was working at a small firm, struggling with bills, and trying to take care of his newborn son. He didn't ask for money, just conversation, and that felt genuine. That night, I realized something important. I didn't want revenge on all of them. I wanted understanding, maybe even closure. My parents might never change, but maybe the next generation could be different. So I made a quiet decision. I'd help Nathan, not with money, but with guidance. I offered to help him redo his resume, connect him with a few people in my network. He was grateful, genuinely, and through that small act, I felt something begin to heal. But the storm wasn't over. A month later, my mother called again. This time her voice was sharper, more desperate. Giselle, I don't know what's gotten into you. We've always done our best for you. You think success gives you the right to treat us like this? Her words didn't sting anymore. They just sounded tired. I answered softly, Mom, I'm not treating you badly. I'm just protecting my peace. You're being selfish. I was selfless for 29 years, I said quietly. I think it's time I learn how to be selfish. She didn't know what to say. I could hear the silence on the other end, a silence she wasn't used to from me. Fine, she said finally. Don't come crying to us when life turns on you. I smiled faintly. I won't. When I hung up, I felt a strange calmness wash over me. Not joy, not victory, but peace. This was it. The shift. The moment where I realized I didn't owe them my success, my savings, or my forgiveness. Still, I wasn't done. I decided to visit them one last time, not out of guilt, but for closure. I wanted to look them in the eyes and speak the truth, calmly, completely. When I arrived, my mother opened the door with the same forced smile. My father sat in his usual chair, the television flickering behind him. They looked smaller somehow, not in size but in presence, like time had finally caught up with their denial. We talked for a while, about Nathan's baby, about the weather, about nothing that really mattered, and then I said it. I'm not giving you the money. The words came out steady, almost soft. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My father frowned. Excuse me? I met his gaze. You heard me. I can't give you that money. It wouldn't fix what's broken between us. My mother blinked rapidly. We're your parents. I know, I said. And I'll always be grateful for that. But being my parents doesn't mean you're entitled to my life. They stared at me, stunned. Maybe they expected tears or hesitation, but there was none left. My father scoffed. So you're just going to let your own family fall apart? I shook my head. It's already fallen apart, Dad, years ago. You just didn't notice. The silence that followed was heavy, but not painful. It was honest. For once I was the one speaking, and they were the ones listening. I stood up, ready to leave. My mother grabbed my hand, her voice trembling. You've changed so much, I nodded. Yes, because I had to. And then I left, calmly, without slamming the door, without looking back. Driving home, I felt lighter. The revenge wasn't about them anymore. It was about me reclaiming myself, about no longer needing to be seen through their narrow lens of usefulness. That night, I sat on my balcony again, the same place where my story had shifted weeks ago. The city glowed below, silent and alive. I held my cup of tea and whispered to myself, you did it. Not the revenge they'd recognize, but the kind that transforms you quietly from victim to victor. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone to remember me. I had remembered myself, and that, I realized, was the calmest revenge of all. When my mother's call ended that night, I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. The silence of the penthouse seemed to echo with the ghost of her words. "You could sell it. We need $39,000. It's time to give back to the family." That phrase kept looping in my head. Give back to the family. What family? The one that forgot my birthdays? The one that celebrated my sister's engagement, my brother's promotion, my cousin's baby shower, but never thought to invite me? The family that only called when they needed something from me? I thought of all those years when I used to check my phone every day, hoping to see their names on the screen. Just a message, a call, anything. And now, when I was finally at peace with their absence, they were back, not with affection, but with a price tag. That night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what it really meant to be loved and what it meant to be used. Over the next few days, the calls didn't stop. My mother called again. My father sent a voice note, awkward and hesitant. Then my sister messaged me, pretending to check in, asking how I was doing, but slipping in the same question toward the end. "Mom said you're doing really well, right? Maybe you can help them out this time." This time. That small phrase broke something inside me, because it reminded me that there had never been a first time. There had never been a single moment when they were there for me. Not during college when I lived on noodles. Not when I fell sick and couldn't afford medicine. Not when I failed my first interview and cried all night. Now suddenly, they were a chorus of caring voices, calling me sweetheart, saying we miss you, telling me how proud they were. I could almost hear the calculation in their tone, how every word was leading toward the number, $39,000. It was a strange mixture of sadness and irony. Part of me wanted to scream, another part just felt hollow. Then came the guilt trip. My mother began sending long voice notes, the kind that started with, "I know we've made mistakes, but family is family," and ended with, "God blesses those who give." She talked about my father's health, about bills, about how it's your turn to help. And every time I heard those words, I remembered the nights I waited outside the hospital alone, when I was the one sick, waiting for a bus, wishing someone from the family would come, but no one did. One morning I decided I couldn't live in that emotional tug-of-war anymore, so I took a deep breath, and I called her back. "Mom," I said softly, "I've been thinking about what you asked." Her tone immediately brightened. "Oh, darling, thank God, we knew you'd understand. You've always had such a big heart." I almost laughed. "I'll help," I said. There was a pause of relief. "Really? Oh, Giselle, that's wonderful. I knew, but," I continued, "on one condition." Her voice dropped. "Condition?" "Yes, I'll come visit next weekend. We'll sit together and talk through everything face to face. No more calls, no middlemen, no cousins. I want to see everyone myself." There was a long silence, and I could almost imagine the flicker of discomfort on her face. "Oh, well, of course. But you know your father's not feeling well, and—" "I just want to see you," I interrupted gently. "After all these years." She hesitated, then said, "All right, come home." The following weekend, I drove to the house I hadn't seen in nearly 5 years. I expected the same place, but somehow it felt smaller. The garden I used to play in was now overgrown. The paint on the gate had peeled away, and as I stood there, my heart didn't ache like I thought it would. It just felt quiet. My mother opened the door. She looked older, thinner. My father was in his chair, pretending to watch TV but clearly listening to every word. My siblings were there too, all gathered, waiting. The air was thick with awkwardness and forced smiles. I walked in, hugged them politely, and sat down. They started talking about how proud they were, how they'd seen the pictures online, how success never changes a good daughter. I listened calmly, sipping tea, nodding occasionally. Then after a while, I leaned back and said, "So, about the $39,000. The room fell silent. My father cleared his throat. "We didn't want to bother you, but your mother thought—" "It's fine," I said gently. "But I need to understand something first." They looked confused. "Why now?" I asked quietly. "Why after 3 years?" My sister shifted uncomfortably. My mother said, "We didn't know how to reach you." I smiled faintly. "Mom, you had my number. It hasn't changed." No one spoke. The silence stretched until my father looked away. Finally, my mother said, "We made mistakes, Giselle. But we're still family." "Yes," I said, still calm, "but family doesn't come back only when there's money on the table." They looked ashamed, or maybe just caught. "I'm not angry," I said softly. "I'm just done trying to earn love that should have been free." They didn't know what to say. My sister started crying quietly. My father muttered something about respect, and my mother stared at me with eyes that were both sad and defensive. I stood up. "I'll help," I said finally. "But not with money. I'll help by being honest. The one thing we've all avoided for too long." I pulled an envelope from my bag. Inside was a printed check, but not filled out. Blank. "I want you to look at this," I said. "This blank check represents every time I wished you'd called, every time I hoped you'd come to see me. You had chances to fill it with love, support, care, but you didn't. Now you're asking for money. But love doesn't work like this." My mother reached out, trembling slightly, but I pulled it back gently. "You don't need this. What you need is to remember that I'm not your ATM. I'm your daughter." Her lips quivered. For a moment, I saw something real. Maybe guilt, maybe regret. My father looked away. My sister just stared down. I placed the check on the table, untouched, and stood up. "I came here today not to refuse you, but to remind myself of who I've become," I said. "I wanted to see if I could still be that daughter who needed your approval. But I'm not her anymore." No one stopped me as I picked up my bag and walked to the door. My mother called my name softly. Not in anger this time, but in confusion, almost sorrow. I paused, looked back, and said quietly, "I wish you had loved me before I had anything to give." Then I left. That night, I drove back to the city in silence. The road stretched ahead, empty, calm, like the space I'd finally found within myself. But the story wasn't over. A week later, my cousin called me. Apparently, after I left, my parents had told everyone in the family that I'd refused to help them. The whispers began again, the same kind that had haunted me years ago. That I was ungrateful, that I'd forgotten where I came from. And strangely, instead of hurting, it made me smile. Because I realized the old me would have rushed to defend herself, to prove her love. The new me didn't need to. Sometimes, revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's just peace, the quiet, steady kind that comes from walking away from people who only remember your name when your success becomes useful to them. That peace was my revenge. But destiny wasn't done yet. My parents' story, my so-called family's whispers, they were about to face the mirror I never showed them. Because what happened next, no one in my family was prepared for. And when it did, it wasn't anger or spite, or shouting that brought justice. It was the truth. The calm kind. The kind that stays. After that day, everything changed in small, almost invisible ways. It wasn't like a movie scene with doors slamming or dramatic words thrown into the air. It was quieter, like a slow tide pulling away from the shore, taking with it all the noise, all the guilt, all the craving for something I had spent years chasing. Their love. I went back to my penthouse, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a fortress built to prove something. It just felt like home. My home. The walls weren't trophies anymore. The silence didn't mock me. It comforted me. The first week was peaceful. My phone barely rang, and when it did, it wasn't family. It was colleagues, friends, clients, People who valued me not for what I could give, but for what I could be. I poured myself into work again, but this time not to escape feelings. I worked because I wanted to build, not to prove. Then one morning I received a message from my cousin, the same one who had posted that picture of my penthouse. It said, "Your parents are in trouble. You might want to see this." Attached was a screenshot of a post from one of my relatives. It read, "Never push away the one who could have been your greatest blessing. Karma has a way of finding you." I scrolled down and saw the comments. Vague, half gossip, half pity. My parents had apparently taken a loan from a distant uncle for some family investment that went wrong. People were whispering about them again. But this time not about me. About their greed, their mistakes, their hypocrisy. I didn't feel joy. Not the kind you'd expect from revenge. It was more like a quiet recognition. Life was simply unfolding, balancing itself, without me lifting a finger. For years I'd believed revenge meant making someone feel what they'd made me feel. But sitting there, sipping my coffee, I realized something different. Sometimes, revenge is simply not being pulled back into their chaos. Still, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of compassion. They were my parents, imperfect, selfish, and flawed. But still, the people who once held me when I cried as a child. I wasn't going to rescue them, but I also didn't want to see them fall apart. So I did something unexpected. Something even I didn't see coming. I wrote my mother a letter. A real one, on paper. No emails, no texts. It started like this. "Mom, I'm not writing to offer money, but I am offering truth. I hope one day you understand that both are valuable, but only one can save a family." I told her everything I had never said. How it felt growing up invisible. How I used to stay up late listening for the sound of her voice calling me down for dinner. But it never came. How I waited at my graduation with a seat saved for them that stayed empty. How every forgotten birthday became a small scar. I wrote about how her recent call had reopened those wounds, and how it forced me to realize something painful. That love built on need isn't love at all. And then I ended it with this. "I forgive you, but I'm also setting you free from the responsibility of pretending we're close. If someday you want to rebuild something real, I'll be here. Not as an ATM, not as proof of your success, but as your daughter. Until then, I wish you peace." When I mailed it, I didn't expect a reply. I didn't even know if she'd read it. But writing it was for me, not for her. It was my closure, my quiet victory. A few months passed. The seasons changed. I started therapy again. Not because I was broken, but because I wanted to stay whole. My business grew. I hired more people, traveled, even started volunteering with a mentorship program for young women who had come from neglected families like mine. Helping them helped me understand something deeper about myself, that I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. Then one evening, as I returned from a speaking event, I saw a message on my phone. Unknown number, it said, "Giselle." "It's Mom." I froze for a second. She continued, "I got your letter." I cried for hours. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want to tell you something. We sold some things and paid the debt. Your father's quieter these days. Maybe he's thinking, finally, we're trying to understand what went wrong. Thank you for your honesty. It hurt, but it was true. I sat there in my car, holding my phone, staring at the message until my eyes blurred. It wasn't an apology, not fully, but it was something. A crack in the wall that had separated us for so long. I typed back slowly. "I'm glad you're okay. Take care of each other." And that was it. I didn't offer money. I didn't offer another visit. Just peace. That night, I went up to my rooftop balcony, looked at the city lights stretching endlessly, and finally felt free. The kind of freedom that doesn't come from cutting people off, but from no longer needing their approval to breathe. I remembered the girl I used to be, the one who waited by her phone, the one who built a life just to be noticed. I wanted to tell her, "You did it. You found peace not by making them pay, but by refusing to let their absence define your worth." It's strange how revenge stories are often told as if they end with triumph, with the other person destroyed, humiliated, or begging for forgiveness. But mine wasn't like that. My revenge was silent. It was the moment I looked at the people who once broke me and felt nothing but calm. It was realizing that I could wish them well without wishing myself smaller. It was living a life so full, so honest, that their absence no longer hurt. Over time, my relationship with them didn't completely vanish. It just transformed. My mother would send a message every few months, short ones, updates about my father's health, or the garden, or small family news. I would reply politely, no drama, no anger, just distant respect. And in that space, I found something even deeper than revenge. Self-respect. I learned that not everyone deserves access to your success story. That family isn't measured by blood, but by consistency. And that sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself, and for them, is to let them face the silence they once gave you. A year later, I received a small package. No return address, but I knew who it was from. Inside was a framed photograph. Me, as a child, sitting between my parents, smiling. On the back, written in my mother's handwriting, "Forgive us. We're learning." I didn't cry. I just placed it on a shelf near my window, next to a plant I'd been nursing back to life. Every time I watered it, I'd glance at the photo and think, healing is slow, but it happens. Even for broken families, and maybe that's the real lesson here, revenge doesn't always need to be cruel. Sometimes the calmest form of revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't, and doing it without bitterness, because peace, real peace, is the loudest answer you can ever give to those who only saw your worth in dollars. So, when people online comment on my videos or interviews asking, "Do your parents know how successful you are now?" I smile and say, they know enough. I don't tell them about the letter, or the texts, or the photo. Those belong to me. To the version of me who learned that walking away doesn't mean giving up. It means growing up. And when I close my laptop at the end of the day, I whisper the same thing I wrote in that letter. I forgive you, but I'm free. That's it. That's my calm revenge. If you've stayed with me through this journey, thank you. I hope my story reminded you that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't fire or fury, it's grace. If you've ever been forgotten, used, or made to feel invisible, remember, your peace is power. If you liked this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my Calm Revenge for more stories like this. Stories that remind us that sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's calm, and it always, always finds its way home.